Why it sucks to be born as a coyote. Imagine being born into a world where everyone fears you, not because you're some giant monster, not because you're a super predator at the top of the food chain, but because you're a coyote. From the moment you open your eyes, the deck is stacked against you. Humans hate you. Farmers despise you. Entire government programs exist to wipe you out. Cartoons mock you as the eternal loser chasing the roadrunner. And yet somehow you survive. Not because life as a coyote is easy, but because you're forced to become one of the most adaptable animals on Earth just to keep breathing. This is why it sucks to be born as a coyote. Establishing the tone. Coyotes are survivors. They've been shot, poisoned, trapped, blown up, and run over by cars for well over a century. And yet their numbers keep growing. You'd think that means they're thriving, right? But here's the dark truth. Their success isn't because life is good for coyotes. It's because life is so brutally difficult that only the toughest, cleverest, and most adaptable individuals manage to pass on their genes. Being born a coyote is like being drafted into a war you never signed up for. You don't get to choose peace. You don't get to choose comfort. You're born into a struggle for food, for space, and simply for the right to exist. Coyote's reputation. Think about how coyotes are portrayed in culture. In Native American myths, the coyote is a trickster, clever but often foolish, always getting into trouble. In modern cartoons like Looney Tunes, Wile E. Coyote is literally the universe's punching bag. He's smart, inventive, determined, but doomed to fail again and again. And outside of stories, in the real world, coyotes are considered vermin. They're labeled as pests, nuisances, thieves, killers of chickens and calves. Entire rural communities view them as public enemy number one. Unlike wolves, which have been somewhat romanticized in recent decades thanks to conservation efforts and documentaries, coyotes don't get that luxury. Nobody's making heartwarming Disney movies about the noble coyote family. To most people, a coyote is something to be shot on sight. The struggles start at birth. Now let's talk about what it means to actually be born as a coyote. You're not born into some cozy doghouse with humans feeding you kibble and scratching behind your ears. You're born underground in a dark den dug into dirt or hidden beneath rocks, logs, or abandoned buildings. Your mother, exhausted and constantly stressed, gives birth to a litter of maybe 5, 6, sometimes 10 pups. Sounds like a big family, right? But here's the catch. Not all of you are going to make it. The first few weeks of your life, you're completely blind and helpless. Your survival depends entirely on your mother, who has to leave you alone in the den to go hunt. Every time she steps out, she risks not coming back. Maybe she gets shot by a rancher. Maybe she gets hit by a car. Maybe she just doesn't find enough food. And even if she does make it back, you and your siblings are competing fiercely for her milk. Starvation can claim the weakest pups before they even learn to walk. From the very beginning, life as a coyote is a gamble. Kodak, constantly hated by humans. But even if you survive those first fragile weeks, you've still got an even bigger enemy waiting: humans. Unlike wolves, grizzly bears, or mountain lions, coyotes are not respected predators. People don't see them as majestic symbols of the wilderness. Coyotes are treated more like oversized rats, something to be exterminated. For over 100 years, the U.S. government has actively waged war on coyotes. Agencies have spent millions of dollars on poisons, traps, aerial gunning programs, even explosives to kill them off. Entire coyote killing contests are held where hunters compete to see who can shoot the most in a single weekend. Imagine being born into a species where people literally hand out prizes for ending your life. That's what it means to be a coyote. The roadrunner curse. And then there's the cultural curse, the Wile E. Coyote stereotype. It might sound silly, but think about it. For decades, one of the most famous portrayals of a coyote has been a cartoon character who never wins. He tries everything, comes up with brilliant plans, builds rocket-powered contraptions, and still fails every single time. That image sticks in people's minds. Subconsciously, it paints coyotes as pathetic losers, as animals doomed to fail. But here's the twist. In reality, coyotes are the exact opposite. They're not losers. They're one of the greatest survivors on the planet, which only makes their suffering worse. Because the truth is, they have to be tough. They have to adapt. If they weren't, they would have gone extinct decades ago thanks to human hatred. The burden of adaptability. At first glance, you might think coyotes have it pretty good. After all, they've spread across North America. They live in deserts, forests, suburbs, even inside major cities like Chicago and Los Angeles. They eat almost anything: rabbits, rodents, fruit, trash, even small pets if they're desperate. Their adaptability is legendary. But here's the part most people don't realize. Adaptability isn't a luxury, it's a burden. Coyotes don't live in cities because they love the nightlife. They don't raid trash cans because it's fun. They do it because they've been pushed out of their natural habitats, shot on sight in the wild, and forced to find food in whatever scraps are left. Their adaptability is a survival mechanism, proof of just how harsh their lives really are. So when you see a coyote trotting down a suburban street at night, it's not a sign of victory. It's a sign of desperation. The big picture. So let's step back. Why does it suck to be born as a coyote? Because from day one, you're fighting battles no other animal has to fight on the same scale. You're born into a world where half your siblings might not survive their first year. Humans see you as a pest to be exterminated. You're blamed for livestock deaths, pet disappearances, and even dangers you had nothing to do with. Your adaptability is mistaken for thriving, when really it's proof of how relentlessly you're pushed to the edge. Being a coyote means living a life that's misunderstood, hunted, and mocked. And yet, it also means being one of the most resilient creatures to ever walk this continent. Because despite all the odds, coyotes endure. So, yeah, imagine being born into a world where everyone fears you, hates you, or laughs at you. Imagine struggling every single day just to eat, just to keep your family safe, just to avoid being killed for sport. That's the reality of being a coyote. And in this deep dive, we're going to explore exactly why it sucks to be born as one. From the bad reputation, to the daily fight for survival, to the strange way coyotes have become both villains and survivors in the story of North America. Let's start with their reputation. Because honestly, before a coyote even takes its first breath, the world has already decided it's the bad guy. 1. The bad reputation. So, we've set the stage. You're a coyote pup, barely a few weeks old, eyes just starting to open. You haven't even learned how to howl yet. You don't know how to hunt. You don't understand the dangers outside your den. And yet, before you've even taken your first step into the world, your reputation is already ruined. Because the truth is, coyotes don't get the benefit of the doubt. They don't get respect, they don't get admiration, and they certainly don't get celebrated the way wolves, eagles, or even bears sometimes do. No, coyotes are born hated, and that hatred comes from centuries of stories, myths, and misunderstandings that paint them as villains, tricksters, and pests. This is the curse of the bad reputation. Coyotes in myth and legend. Let's start way back, long before cartoons, long before ranchers and rifles. In many Native American traditions, the coyote is a mythological figure. But unlike the noble eagle or the wise owl, the coyote was usually cast as the trickster. Now, the trickster wasn't always purely evil. Sometimes the coyote character was clever, resourceful, even funny. He might outsmart others, sneak food, or stir up trouble just to see what would happen. In some stories, he brought useful lessons or warnings. But here's the thing. The trickster was also foolish. His cleverness often backfired. His schemes collapsed. And in many tales, the coyote wound up embarrassed, punished, or outwitted in the end. So even in the oldest myths, coyotes were already typecast as unreliable, mischievous troublemakers, not noble, not heroic, not powerful, just sneaky, silly, and doomed to fail. That trickster image set the foundation for how coyotes would be viewed for centuries. Coyotes in modern media, the Wile E. curse. Fast forward to the 20th century. What's the single most famous coyote in the world? Wile E. Coyote. For decades, Saturday morning cartoons showed him chasing the roadrunner across desert landscapes, always armed with ridiculous Acme gadgets. He was brilliant. He was determined. He had more patience and persistence than any human alive. But no matter what he did, he always failed. Think about the psychology of that. For generations of kids and then adults, the coyote wasn't just a character. He was the symbol of failure, the punchline, the loser who could never win. Even worse, Wile E wasn't just unlucky. He was greedy. He was obsessed with catching something he didn't even need. Coyotes in real life don't chase giant bluebirds across highways. They hunt rabbits, mice, voles, and yes, sometimes chickens. But Wile E became the exaggerated version of every negative stereotype. Sneaky, desperate, greedy, foolish, doomed. So while wolves eventually got their big media redemption arc, think Balto, White Fang, Game of Thrones, coyotes never did. They were cemented as comedy villains. And comedy villains rarely get sympathy. The rural villain. Now let's step away from pop culture and look at how humans in real life view coyotes. If you grew up in a rural area, especially in the western United States, chances are you've heard coyotes howling at night. To some people, that sound is beautiful, wild, even haunting. But to a lot of farmers and ranchers, that howl is the sound of danger. For more than a century, ranchers have blamed coyotes for killing sheep, goats, and calves. Sometimes the blame is fair. Coyotes do go after livestock, especially weak or unattended animals. But here's the problem. Coyotes get blamed for everything. A calf dies from illness? Must have been coyotes. A sheep gets attacked by stray dogs? Coyotes take the blame. Even vultures or feral hogs sometimes get away with it because ranchers are so fixated on coyotes as the villain. This reputation as livestock killers turned coyotes into enemy number one across much of rural America. By the early 1900s, the U.S. government was spending millions on extermination campaigns. Coyotes were shot, poisoned, trapped, blown up with dynamite in their dens, all because of their reputation as killers. And here's the irony. Coyotes aren't even that efficient at killing livestock. Studies show they make up a small fraction of overall livestock losses. Disease, weather, and accidents cause far more deaths, but the bad reputation sticks harder than the facts. The pest label. And if being called a killer wasn't bad enough, coyotes also got branded with another label. Pest. Unlike wolves, which prefer remote wilderness, coyotes move closer and closer to human settlements. Why? Because humans destroyed their habitats, killed their natural prey, and left garbage everywhere. Coyotes adapted. They started showing up on the edges of towns, raiding trash cans, eating roadkill, even hunting rats in alleyways. And once you're in a city or suburb, you lose whatever tiny bit of dignity you had left. Now you're just a pest. You're the thing people see at night and call animal control about. You're the creature blamed when a cat goes missing, even if there's no proof. You're the mangy mutt trotting down the street that people throw rocks at or try to run over. Being labeled a pest means you're not even respected as wildlife anymore. You're downgraded to the same level as cockroaches and rats. Terror fear factor. But it's not just annoyance. There's also fear. To many people, coyotes aren't just nuisances. They're dangerous. News headlines love to highlight rare coyote attacks on pets or even children. Never mind that such attacks are extremely uncommon, far rarer than dog bites, for example. All it takes is a few scary stories to fuel the perception that coyotes are lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. And fear is powerful. It doesn't matter if the risk is tiny. Once people believe you're dangerous, you're marked for life. Go bosh the double standard. Here's where it gets really unfair. Other predators have managed to earn back a little respect. Wolves went from being universally hated to being symbols of wilderness conservation. Mountain lions are feared, yes, but also admired for their strength and beauty. Even bears, which actually do pose a real risk to humans, get more sympathy and protection than coyotes. But coyotes, they're stuck at the bottom. No matter how clever, no matter how adaptable, they don't get the romance, the respect, or the admiration, just fear, annoyance, and ridicule. It's the ultimate double standard, the reality behind the reputation. And the worst part? Most of this reputation is built on exaggeration and misunderstanding. Coyotes are tricksters, but that's because they've had to outsmart predators, hunters, and starvation for thousands of years. They are survivors, not because they love eating garbage, but because humans keep destroying their food sources. They do sometimes kill livestock, but usually only when easier food isn't available. The truth is, coyotes are intelligent, family-oriented animals that play an important role in ecosystems. They control rodent populations, clean up carrion, and adapt to fill ecological gaps left behind when wolves were exterminated. But none of that matters to reputation. To most people, the coyote is still the villain, the pest, the nuisance. So here we are, from myths that cast them as foolish tricksters, to cartoons that turn them into eternal losers, to rural communities that see them as bloodthirsty killers. Coyotes are born into a reputation they never asked for. It doesn't matter that they're smart. It doesn't matter that they're resilient. It doesn't matter that they're essential to the environment. The world has already decided coyotes are the bad guys. And that reputation, more than any tooth or claw, more than any survival skill, shapes everything about their lives. Because once you're branded a villain, the world never stops trying to prove it. 2. Survival from day one. So, you're a coyote, not a full-grown survivor yet, not the clever trickster people love to hate, just a newborn pup. Your reputation may already be ruined thanks to myths and media, but here's the real kicker. Before you even get a chance to worry about what people think, you have to survive the most brutal challenge of all, simply making it through your first year of life. And let me tell you, the odds are not in your favor. The den, a fragile start. Coyotes aren't born under the open sky. They start life hidden away, deep in a den. Picture a narrow tunnel dug into loose soil or tucked beneath the roots of a tree. Sometimes it's an abandoned badger burrow. Other times it's under a rock ledge, or even beneath an old barn or shed if you're unlucky enough to be born near humans. Inside it's dark, damp. The walls are packed dirt, lined only with scraps of grass or fur that your mother pulled from her own body to make it a little softer. It's not cozy. It's not safe. It's just hidden. And hidden is the best you can hope for, because from the moment you're born, the world is full of things that want you dead. Litter size versus survival rate. A coyote mother usually gives birth to a litter of anywhere from 4 to 7 pups, sometimes as many as 10. Sounds like a lot, right? Almost like she's stacking the odds in her favor. But here's the cruel truth. Not all of those pups are going to make it. In fact, studies suggest that 50 to 70% of coyote pups die before reaching adulthood. That means if you're born into a litter of 6, there's a decent chance only 2 or 3 of you will ever see your first birthday. Some die within days, the weakest ones who can't compete for milk. Others last weeks or months, only to fall victim to predators, disease, or starvation. And all of them, every single pup, is living on borrowed time. Dependent on mom. In those first weeks, your entire world is your mother. You can't see, you can't hear, you can't walk more than a few wobbly inches. All you can do is squeak and wriggle and hope she comes back. When she's there, you nurse. You pile against your siblings for warmth. You drift in and out of shallow sleep. When she's gone, it's terrifying. The den is silent. The air is cold. Every sound outside, a rustle of grass, a distant howl, the crunch of leaves, could mean danger. And if she doesn't come back, that's it. You won't survive more than a day or two without her. And here's the kicker. Your mother has to leave. She can't stay with you all the time. She has to hunt. She has to eat enough to keep her own body running while also producing milk for half a dozen hungry pups. Every trip out of the den is a gamble. She could be shot, poisoned, hit by a car, or simply fail to find food. If she doesn't make it back, you never even get the chance to grow up. Predators at the door. Even if your mother is strong, even if she does come back, the outside world is packed with predators just waiting for a chance. Wolves. Yes, wolves kill coyotes. They see them as competition, and if a wolf stumbles across a coyote den, it's bad news. Mountain lions. Silent, powerful, and perfectly capable of wiping out pups if they get the opportunity. Bears. They'll dig into dens not because they're hungry for coyote meat, but because they're curious or looking for an easy snack. Birds of prey. Hawks and eagles can swoop down on wandering pups once they start leaving the den. Even other coyotes. Rival packs may kill pups to reduce future competition. Think about that for a second. You're barely a month old and the entire food chain is stacked against you. Disease and parasites. Predators aren't the only threat. Coyotes also face an invisible army of killers. Disease and parasites. Parvovirus, a deadly disease that strikes pups especially hard, causing severe vomiting, diarrhea, and dehydration. Many don't survive it. Distemper. Another viral killer, leaving pups weak, feverish, and often dead within days. Mange, caused by mites burrowing under the skin. It strips away fur, weakens the body, and makes it nearly impossible to stay warm or hunt later in life. Fleas, ticks, and worms. Constant parasites that drain energy, spread illness, and make life miserable. When you're a fragile pup with no immune system to speak of, any one of these can wipe you out before you even leave the den. Starvation, the silent killer. But the biggest killer of all? Starvation. Coyotes are opportunistic hunters, but opportunity doesn't always knock. Winters can be brutal. Summers can dry out the land and scatter prey. Rabbits, mice, and deer fawns don't always show up on schedule. And when food runs short, pups are the first to suffer. If your mother can't find enough to eat, her milk supply dries up. You and your siblings whine and cry, but it doesn't matter. There's nothing left to give. Some pups starve slowly, growing weaker and quieter until they simply stop moving. Others are abandoned when the mother is forced to make an impossible choice: save herself or go down with her litter. Starvation doesn't always kill quickly. It drags on. It wastes you away. And in the end, it's often the deciding factor in whether half a litter lives or dies. Siblings, family, or competition. Growing up with siblings should mean support, right? A built-in pack of playmates? Well, yes and no. On one hand, siblings keep you warm. They help you learn to wrestle, howl, and eventually hunt. They're your first taste of social life. On the other hand, they're also your direct competition. There's only so much milk, only so much food, and only so much attention from mom. The stronger pups push their way to the front. The weaker ones get shoved aside. And in the cruel arithmetic of survival, being the runt often means being the first to die. Leaving the den, new dangers. Around 3 to 4 weeks old, pups start venturing outside the den. And this is where survival gets even trickier. The world outside is huge. Bright sunlight blinds you at first. The ground is uneven. The smells are overwhelming. Every sound is new. The buzz of insects, the caw of crows, the distant rumble of thunder. But along with wonder comes danger. Step too far from the den, and you risk being spotted by a hawk. Make too much noise, and predators can find you. Even something as simple as wandering into tall grass could end with a snakebite. And if humans discover the den, it's game over. Farmers and ranchers sometimes deliberately dig up dens to kill the pups inside. Others set traps or poison nearby. For coyotes, curiosity doesn't kill the cat. It kills the pup. Got you the grim statistics. By the time fall rolls around, when the surviving pups are old enough to start hunting on their own, Most of the litter is already gone. Some estimates suggest only 1 or 2 pups per litter make it to adulthood. Out of 6 siblings, that means 4 or 5 never see their first winter. Think about that. Imagine being born into a family where the majority of your brothers and sisters are practically doomed from the start, and you have no idea if you're next. Why coyotes have big litters? Now you might wonder, if life is this brutal, why even have so many pups? It's actually nature's insurance policy. Coyotes evolved to have large litters precisely because so many don't survive. It's the species' way of hedging bets. The more pups born, the better the odds that at least a couple will make it. It's like rolling dice. Most of the rolls are going to be losses. But if you throw enough dice, a few will land in your favor. For coyotes, survival isn't about thriving. It's about endurance. It's about keeping the bloodline going, no matter how many lives are lost along the way. So what does survival from day one really mean for a coyote? It means being born into darkness, relying completely on a mother who might not make it back. It means losing half your siblings before you even learn to hunt. It means predators at the door, disease in your blood, starvation at your belly. It means every single breath is borrowed. And if you're lucky enough to survive those early months, to claw your way through the gauntlet of predators, hunger, and bad luck, then congratulations. You've just earned the right to face an entirely new set of nightmares. Because now, you're no longer just a fragile pup. You're a young coyote stepping into a world where humans are waiting with rifles, traps, and poison. And that's where the story gets even darker. 3, always hunted. So let's say you've beaten the odds. You were born in a cramped den, survived disease, outlasted starvation, dodged predators, and somehow made it to your first year of life. Congratulations. Except, not really, because now you're big enough to face the greatest predator of all. The one that doesn't just hunt you for food or out of survival, but out of hatred, humans. And when you're a coyote, you are always hunted. The declared war on coyotes. For more than a century, coyotes have been in humanity's crosshairs. Literally. In the late 1800s and early 1900s, as ranching expanded across the American West, coyotes were labeled enemy number one. Wolves had already been exterminated from much of the country, and that left coyotes to take the blame for every dead sheep, every missing calf, every unexplained loss. The U.S. government didn't just tolerate the killing of coyotes, it encouraged it. Agencies spent millions on extermination campaigns. Hunters were paid bounties for every coyote they killed. Entire divisions existed solely to wipe them out. And here's the crazy part. They never stopped. To this day, there are government programs dedicated to killing coyotes, year after year, decade after decade. Imagine being born into a species where the most powerful creature on Earth has officially declared war on you. Methods of killing and the brutality. The methods humans have used against coyotes aren't just deadly, they're brutal. Shooting on sight, farmers, hunters, and even regular people in trucks keep rifles at the ready. Spot a coyote trotting across a field, pull the trigger, no questions asked. Traps. Steel-jawed, leg-hold traps are set in fields, waiting for unsuspecting coyotes. Step in the wrong place, and your leg is crushed between metal jaws. You're left writhing in pain, sometimes for hours until someone comes back to finish you off, or you chew off your own foot to escape. Poison, one of the cruelest weapons. In the 20th century, poison-laced meat was scattered across the countryside. Coyotes would eat it, convulse, foam at the mouth, and die slowly and agonizingly. Sometimes pups would eat poisoned parents when they returned to the den, and the whole family would die. Aerial gunning, helicopters, and small planes fly over open land, with hunters leaning out the side shooting coyotes from the sky. There's no sport, no fairness, just slaughter from above. Killing contests. Even today, communities host events where hunters compete to see who can kill the most coyotes in a weekend. Dozens, sometimes hundreds of animals are shot, piled up, and discarded like trash. Winners get cash prizes or new rifles. Think about that for a moment. Entire human events exist for the sole purpose of wiping out your kind. Why the hatred? So why this obsession? Why this endless war? It boils down to three words: fear, blame, and control. Fear: coyotes are predators. And even though they almost never attack humans, people fear the sight of them. Their howls at night spark primal instincts: fear of the wild, fear of being hunted. Blame: coyotes get blamed for livestock losses, for missing pets, even for ecosystem problems they didn't cause. They're the convenient scapegoat for anything that goes wrong in rural areas. Control: ranchers and farmers want total control over their land. Coyotes represent wildness, unpredictability, something they can't fence in or tame. And that makes people furious. So coyotes aren't just killed because of what they do, they're killed because of what they represent: untamed nature refusing to bow down. The futility of killing. Here's the ironic part. For over a century, humans have tried to wipe out coyotes. And yet, coyotes are more widespread today than ever before. You'd think killing them by the millions would have worked. But no, coyotes adapted. In fact, the more they were hunted, the faster they reproduced. It's biology's ultimate revenge. When populations are under pressure, coyotes respond by having larger litters, breeding younger, and spreading farther. So every bullet, every poison trap, every helicopter massacre just made them stronger in the long run. But here's the catch. Their survival doesn't mean life is easy. It just means they suffer more, breed more, and keep running the gauntlet year after year. Survival for coyotes isn't a victory. It's an endless cycle of being hunted, adapting, and hunted again. Psychological toll. Now, obviously, coyotes don't think about psychology the way humans do, but imagine this life. You can't trot across an open field without risking a gunshot. You can't sniff at a scrap of meat without wondering if it's poisoned. You can't even howl to your family at night without drawing attention to yourself. Everything you do, every step, every choice, comes with the risk of death. That constant pressure shapes coyotes into the clever, paranoid survivors they are. But it also means living in a constant state of danger. Imagine your entire life being one long game of hide and seek, except the seeker has helicopters, guns, and poison. That's not living. That's surviving. Coyotes versus cars. And even when humans aren't actively hunting you, they're still killing you in massive numbers, unintentionally. Coyotes are constantly hit by cars. Highways cut through their territories. Roads slice across their hunting grounds. They dart after prey or cross the pavement at night, and bam! Headlights, screeching tires, impact. Some die instantly. Others are left broken and bleeding on the roadside. Either way, it's just another reminder. Humans have built a world where coyotes aren't allowed to move freely without risking death. Tragic stories of survival against odds. And yet, despite all this, there are endless stories of coyotes surviving the impossible. A coyote shot in the chest, crawling back to its den to die beside its pups. A coyote caught in a trap, gnawing off its own leg and limping away, still managing to hunt afterward. Coyotes poisoned, only for the survivors in the pack to learn to avoid baited carcasses in the future. Every atrocity humans throw at them becomes a lesson. Every massacre makes the survivors tougher. Coyotes turn tragedy into resilience. But let's be honest, that resilience comes at a horrific cost. No animal should have to live in a world where mutilation, poisoning, and slaughter are everyday risks. The human double standard. Here's the cruel irony. Humans admire resilience in themselves. We cheer for underdogs. We love stories of survivors who overcome impossible odds. And yet, when coyotes show those same qualities, we don't admire them. We punish them. We double down on the hunting, the trapping, the killing. Coyotes are living proof that no matter how hard you try to erase them, wildness finds a way back. And instead of respecting that, we resent it. So what does it mean to be a coyote? It means being born into a world where humans, the most powerful species on Earth, have declared you an enemy. It means every step you take risks a bullet, a trap, or a car. It means living in constant fear, adapting faster than anyone else, and still being hunted no matter what. Always hunted, always blamed, always misunderstood. And if you manage to survive the guns and the poison and the contests in the roads, what then? Well, then you face the next challenge, trying to carve out a life in a world where humans are constantly pushing into your territory, tearing up your habitat, and forcing you into dangerous encounters you never wanted. Which brings us to the next chapter, nature versus human civilization. Because if being hunted isn't enough to make life miserable, being forced to live side by side with the very creatures trying to kill you definitely is. 4. Nature versus human civilization. By now, you've probably noticed a theme. If you're a coyote, life is hard enough in the wild. Predators, disease, starvation, endless hunting. But here's the twist. Even if you somehow survive all that, there's another enemy waiting. One that doesn't stalk you like a wolf or pounce on you like a cougar. Instead, it creeps in slowly, reshaping the very ground beneath your paws. That enemy is human civilization. Because the truth is, the world you were born into as a coyote isn't the same wild frontier it used to be. It's shrinking. It's paved over, fenced off, and poisoned. And as cities grow and farms spread, you're forced to adapt or die. Habitat loss, the vanishing wilderness. Once upon a time, coyotes roamed freely across the vast plains, deserts, and forests of North America. Open lands stretched for miles. Prey animals like rabbits and deer thrived. Dens could be dug anywhere. But then humans showed up with plows, roads, houses, and suburbs. Grasslands turned into shopping malls. Forests became farmland. Rivers were dammed, marshes drained, and meadows paved with asphalt. For coyotes, this was like the ground disappearing beneath their feet. Every time a subdivision goes up, that's another den site lost. Every time a forest is cleared, that's another hunting ground gone. Every time farmland expands, coyotes are pushed closer to people, not because they want to, but because they have nowhere else left to go. And when your habitat disappears, you face a brutal choice. Move on or risk starvation. Issue the urban invasion. Here's the thing about coyotes. They're survivors. When their wild homes vanish, they don't just give up. They adapt. And that's why we now see coyotes trotting through downtown streets at night, slipping through alleys and raiding trash cans behind restaurants. But let's be clear, coyotes don't move into cities because they love them. They move because they've been forced out of everywhere else. Cities offer food, yes, garbage, rodents, the occasional unlucky pet. But cities also come with cars, poison, and humans who call animal control at the first glimpse of glowing eyes in the dark. So every night a coyote spends in the suburbs, it's gambling with its life. One wrong turn onto a busy street, one careless raid on a chicken coop, one encounter with a trigger-happy homeowner. And that gamble ends in tragedy. Urban coyotes are often portrayed as bold, dangerous invaders. But the truth? They're refugees. Refugees from the wilderness we destroyed. Roadkill, death by asphalt. If there's one symbol of the clash between coyotes and civilization, it's the highway. For humans, highways mean progress, speed, and convenience. For coyotes, highways mean death. Roads cut directly through coyote territory. A hunting ground divided by concrete becomes a gauntlet of danger. Rabbits and rodents dart across roads and coyotes chase, only to be struck by cars. Mothers try to lead pups across highways, and entire litters are wiped out in an instant. Coyotes don't understand traffic patterns, headlights, or speed limits. To them, it's just open space with invisible death rushing at 70 miles an hour. Every year, thousands of coyotes are killed as roadkill across North America. Some die instantly. Others are left broken and suffering at the roadside, whimpering until the end. Drivers may not even stop. And yet, no matter how many coyotes die on the asphalt, others still risk it, because the highways are built across the very lands they need to survive. To get to food, water, or safe dens, they have no choice but to cross. The livestock war, farmers versus coyotes. Nowhere is the battle between coyotes and humans more personal than on farms and ranches. To a coyote, a sheep or goat in a field looks like easy prey. To a farmer, that same sheep is income, food, and livelihood. You can see where the conflict starts. For generations, coyotes have been cast as the ultimate villains of the farm. Farmers wake up to a dead lamb and assume a coyote was responsible. Sometimes they're right. Sometimes it was stray dogs or illness or even a bird of prey. But the blame almost always falls on coyotes, and the response is almost always lethal. Farmers set traps around their property. They scatter poison meat. They shoot on sight. Some even hire professional hunters to patrol their land. To the farmer, it feels like defense. To the coyote, it feels like a death sentence for just trying to eat. The escalation cycle. Here's the ironic part. Killing coyotes to protect livestock often backfires. When adults are killed, surviving packs adjust. Breeding pairs have more pups. More coyotes move into the empty territory. Instead of one coyote raiding a chicken coop, suddenly there are several. The war escalates endlessly, and coyotes keep bouncing back. But for individual coyotes, that cycle means constant bloodshed. Generations are wiped out, families broken apart, pups orphaned. Survival doesn't mean winning. It just means being hunted forever. The farmer's double standard. And here's the cruel double standard. Farmers don't hate all animals that threaten their livestock. Stray dogs, for example, can kill far more sheep than coyotes. Illness and bad weather cause even bigger losses. But those don't inspire the same fury. Coyotes have been singled out, demonized, and turned into symbols of everything threatening rural life. Killing them becomes less about actual losses and more about revenge, control, and tradition. Conquer the endless frontier. One reason coyotes are hunted so relentlessly is because they never stop showing up. Eliminate them in one area, and more drift in from the next. Try to fence them out, and they dig under. Try to starve them out, and they adapt their diet. Coyotes are, in a way, the living embodiment of the wilderness, refusing to disappear. And that makes them infuriating to humans who want total control over the land. They're proof that nature can't be tamed, proof that wildness always slips through the cracks, and for that, they're punished. The psychological clash. There's a deeper reason behind the coyote-human conflict: psychology. Humans see the land as something to own, to manage, to control. Coyotes see the land as something to live in, hunt in, and survive on. That clash of worldviews creates endless friction. To the coyote, killing a chicken is survival. To the farmer, it's theft. To the coyote, trotting down a suburban street is just traveling through. To the human, it's trespassing. Coyotes don't recognize property lines. They don't respect fences. They don't care if the pasture is yours or the trash can belongs to you. To them, the world is one continuous hunting ground. And to humans, that's intolerable. Coyotes as survivors, not villains. But here's the truth. Coyotes aren't moving into human spaces because they're villains. They're doing it because they have no choice. We paved over their hunting grounds. We destroyed their habitats. We killed off the wolves and other predators, leaving coyotes to fill the gap. And then we had the audacity to call them pests for adapting. In reality, coyotes are survivors. They don't want to fight humans. They don't want to raid farms. They don't want to risk crossing highways. They do these things because the alternative is extinction. And so they carry on, adapting again and again, trying to live in a world that seems determined to erase them. So what does nature versus human civilization mean for a coyote? It means watching your wilderness vanish under concrete. It means risking your life every time you cross a road. It means being blamed for livestock deaths, hunted for revenge, and punished for refusing to disappear. It means fighting not just for food, not just for survival, but for the right to exist at all in a world that keeps shrinking around you. Coyotes may be masters of adaptation, but adaptation comes at a cost. Every night spent dodging cars, every den dug beneath a shed, every raid on a chicken coop. It's not proof of thriving, it's proof of desperation. And that desperation sets the stage for the next challenge in a coyote's life. Finding enough to eat in a world that's constantly trying to starve you out. Which brings us to the next chapter, the struggles of food. Because if being hunted, poisoned, and pushed off the land wasn't enough, coyotes also have to face the most basic enemy of all, hunger. 5. Food struggles. If you've made it this far in life as a coyote, if you've dodged hunters, avoided traps, survived disease, and crossed highways without becoming roadkill, congratulations. You're already tougher than most animals ever get the chance to be. But surviving isn't the same as living, because every single day there's one constant, gnawing problem you can never escape. Hunger. For a coyote, hunger isn't an occasional discomfort. It's not "I skipped breakfast today." Hunger is a shadow that follows you everywhere, a force that shapes every decision, every risk, every howl at the moon. And when the stomach growls, the coyote has to decide, do I scavenge or do I hunt? Scavenging versus hunting, the daily gamble. Coyotes are opportunists. They'll eat just about anything that fits in their jaws. Rodents, rabbits, birds, snakes, insects, berries, carrion, even grass if nothing else is available. But here's the brutal reality. Hunting isn't easy. Catching a rabbit isn't guaranteed. Rabbits are fast. Squirrels dart into trees. Birds take flight. A single missed pounce can mean another day of empty bellies. So coyotes scavenge whenever they can. A rotting deer carcass on the roadside, a half-eaten burger dropped in a park, a pile of discarded fast food bags. To a coyote, that's a feast. But scavenging comes with its own risks. Carcasses on highways often mean dodging cars. Garbage means sneaking close to humans, which means risking being shot, trapped, or poisoned. It's a constant gamble. Hunt and risk wasting energy for nothing. Scavenge and risk your life for scraps. And the sad truth? Most days, coyotes are still hungry. Picture the harsh reality of winter. If hunger is bad in summer, winter is hell. In spring and summer, prey animals are abundant. Rabbits, rodents, and birds are everywhere. Fruits and berries ripen in the fields. Insects buzz under every leaf. But in winter, everything disappears. The ground freezes. Prey animals hide in burrows. Birds migrate. Plants die back. Streams freeze over. For a coyote, every day in winter is a test of endurance. Each step through snow burns precious calories. Each failed hunt means a weaker body. Some coyotes starve to death before the season ends. Mothers with pups face the worst of it. They must find food not only for themselves but for their litter. And if food is scarce, pups simply don't make it. It's estimated that in harsh winters, the survival rate for coyote pups can drop to less than 30%. That means the majority never even reach their first spring. And yet the coyote keeps going, because giving up means death. The garbage dependency. Now let's talk about one of the strangest and saddest parts of a coyote struggle: dependence on human garbage. In cities and suburbs, food isn't natural anymore. It's leftover pizza crusts, spilled French fries, overturned trash cans, compost bins, and the occasional unlucky house cat. Coyotes don't raid garbage because they want to. They do it because it's often the only reliable food source around. And the cruel irony, we created this problem. We took away their wild hunting grounds, paved over their prairies, and replaced them with strip malls and suburbs. Then when coyotes dare to adapt by eating from trash, we punish them for it. A coyote caught raiding garbage risks being reported to animal control, trapped, relocated, or killed. Yet the hunger drives them back again and again. It's a vicious cycle. Hunger drives coyotes to trash. Trash brings them into contact with humans. Contact with humans leads to fear, conflict, and often death. All because survival doesn't give them another option. The human double standard on food. Here's the kicker. Humans hate when coyotes eat garbage, but think nothing of their own wastefulness. We throw out nearly 40% of the food we produce. Perfectly edible meat, fruits, and vegetables rot in landfills. To a coyote, that's more food than they could ever dream of in the wild. But when they dare to take it, we call them pests. It's not just about garbage either. Coyotes that eat pets or livestock are called killers. But the truth is, they're doing exactly what humans do, eating meat to survive. The only difference is, humans raise their meat in pens and slaughterhouses. Coyotes hunt theirs in fields. The hypocrisy couldn't be clearer. Humans are allowed to consume endlessly, but coyotes are condemned for every scrap they take. Starvation as a constant threat. Unlike domestic animals, coyotes don't have guaranteed meals. There's no bag of kibble, no stocked fridge, no grocery store down the road. For them, every day is life or death. Some coyotes go days without eating, their ribs showing, their fur thinning, their steps slowing. Starvation weakens them, making them easier targets for disease, predators, or hunters. And starvation doesn't kill quickly. It drags out the suffering. First comes weakness, then disorientation, then collapse, finally death. For humans, missing a meal is an inconvenience. For coyotes, missing too many meals is the end. True, the illusion of abundance. Sometimes people look at coyotes and say, but they seem to be everywhere. They must be thriving. The truth is more complicated. Yes, coyotes are widespread. Yes, they're adaptable. But that doesn't mean life is easy. Being everywhere doesn't mean they're living well. It just means they're desperately trying to scrape by wherever they can. Their abundance is an illusion of success. What it really reflects is their endless hunger. Coyotes spread into suburbs, cities, and farms not because life there is good, but because life in the wilderness has been stripped away. If coyotes truly had enough food, they wouldn't need to dig through dumpsters or risk their lives for a bite of chicken feed. Coyotes as survivors of scarcity. The most remarkable thing about coyotes isn't how dangerous they are. It's how they endure hunger. They can go days without a proper meal. They can survive on scraps, on insects, even on grass if necessary. They can lose entire litters in winter and still try again the next year. But make no mistake, endurance doesn't mean ease. Survival isn't the same as comfort. Just because coyotes can endure hunger doesn't mean it doesn't suck. So what does food mean to a coyote? It means endless struggle. Every day is a gamble between hunting and scavenging. Every winter is a season of starvation. Every trash can is both a lifeline and a death trap. For humans, food is choice. For coyotes, food is desperation. And that's why it sucks to be born a coyote. Because no matter how hard you fight, no matter how clever you adapt, hunger never leaves your side. And this hunger shapes more than just their stomachs. It shapes their families, their howls, and their very souls. Which brings us to the next chapter. Lonely howls. Because in a world that takes so much, hunger isn't the only emptiness a coyote has to face. 6. Lonely howls. If hunger is the shadow that follows coyotes, then loneliness is the echo that haunts them. Because for a coyote, life isn't meant to be lived alone. Coyotes are social animals. They live in family groups, raise pups together, hunt cooperatively, and defend territories as one. But here's the cruel twist. In a world where humans are constantly breaking those bonds through hunting, disease, and starvation, coyotes spend a lot of their lives howling not just to find each other, but to mourn what's been lost. The family unit, the heart of coyote life. Coyotes aren't lone wolves by default. In fact, the typical coyote life begins in a den surrounded by family. A mother gives birth to a litter, and for a few short weeks, that den is filled with warmth, sound, and play. Siblings wrestle, parents groom their pups. Older siblings sometimes help bring food back to the den. A healthy pack isn't just survival, it's belonging. But that fragile sense of security can be shattered at any moment. One trap, one bullet, one case of mange, and suddenly a mother is gone. A father doesn't return from a hunt. A sibling weakens from starvation. The pack structure crumbles and the survivors scatter. And when they scatter, the howls begin. The sound of loneliness. The coyote's howl is one of the most misunderstood sounds in nature. People hear it and think it's eerie, threatening, even sinister. Movies use it as background noise for horror scenes. Farmers hear it and think it means predators are circling. But most of the time, A coyote's howl isn't about aggression at all. It's about connection. A lone coyote howls to ask, "Where are you?" A pack howls back to say, "We're still here." But when there's no answer, when the family is gone, that howl becomes something different. It becomes a song of grief, a reminder that loneliness has set in. To be a coyote is to know loss, over and over again, and the howls are echoes of that loss. How hunters break families apart. Coyotes don't understand hunting seasons, contests, or poison. To them, life is just life. But humans constantly intervene, tearing apart their social bonds. Take a single coyote killed by a hunter. To us, that's just one less pest. But to a coyote family, it could mean the loss of a parent, the one who provided food or defended the den. A single bullet can doom an entire litter of pups who were waiting, hungry in the den for food that will never arrive. Poison spreads even further. A poisoned carcass left out for one coyote might kill multiple members of a family, all of them connected, all of them gone in days. And in hunting contests, where dozens are killed for sport, the impact isn't just numbers. It's families ripped apart, social structures shattered, territories left unprotected, and survivors forced into deeper loneliness. The human idea of population control ignores the emotional reality. Every kill leaves an echo in the lives of the coyotes who remain. Disease is a silent killer. If hunters don't find you, disease might. Coyotes are vulnerable to mange, a skin disease caused by mites. Mange causes fur loss, skin infections, and eventually death from exposure or starvation. A mangy coyote suffers terribly before it dies, and once it spreads through a family, the suffering multiplies. Rabies is another killer, rare but devastating. An infected coyote may become disoriented, aggressive, or weak. And if others in the pack come into contact with it, the disease spreads quickly. These diseases don't just take individuals. They break down the family structure. A sick mother can't feed her pups. A diseased sibling might be abandoned. A father too weak to hunt leaves the entire pack hungry. For humans, disease means a doctor, maybe medicine, maybe recovery. For coyotes, disease usually means isolation and death. And when disease kills, it leaves survivors howling into empty air. Starvation's role in loss. As we saw in the last chapter, starvation is a constant threat. And when starvation strikes, it doesn't strike evenly. The weakest pups die first. Then the older, frail members of the pack. Sometimes even strong adults collapse from exhaustion after too many failed hunts. To a coyote family, these losses are devastating. Pups don't just represent the future, they're the heart of the family bond. Their play, their energy, their need for care ties the group together. When pups die, the silence that follows is heavy, and starvation often forces survivors into solitude. With fewer pack members to hunt, survival gets harder. Without cooperation, the bond of family shatters, and coyotes are forced into the loneliest existence imaginable. Life as a solitary scavenger, calling into the night with no one left to answer. The myth of the lone coyote. People often talk about the lone coyote as if it's a natural thing, as if coyotes prefer to be alone. But in reality, true solitude is usually forced upon them. When you hear a single coyote howling, chances are you're hearing an animal that's lost its family. It might be searching for a mate, calling for siblings, or trying to reconnect with a pack that's gone. Some eventually find new mates or join with other survivors. But many live and die alone, their howls unanswered. The lone coyote isn't a symbol of independence, it's a symbol of tragedy. Loneliness as a predator of its own. We think of predators as lions, wolves, or hunters with rifles. But loneliness is a predator too. Loneliness drains energy. A solitary coyote has no one to share the burden of hunting with, no one to help defend a den, no one to groom its fur or provide warmth on a cold night. Over time, loneliness kills indirectly. By making survival harder, by forcing desperate risks, by wearing down the will to fight. In the wild, community is survival. And without it, life is not only harder, it's emptier. So why do coyotes howl? Not because they're villains, not because they're plotting, but because they're searching. They're reaching across the darkness, hoping that somewhere out there, another voice will answer back. But too often, those voices have been silenced by hunters, by disease, by hunger. And so the howl lingers, unanswered, a sound both haunting and heartbreaking. Because in the end, that's what it really means to be born a coyote. To live in a world that constantly tears away the ones you love, leaving you to sing into the night, hoping against hope that you're not alone. 7. Adapt or die for most animals. When humans expand into their habitats, the story ends the same way. Extinction, or at best, retreat. Forests vanish, rivers are dammed, suburbs sprawl across grasslands, and the animals who once called those places home either disappear or cling to the margins. But coyotes? They refused to disappear. Instead, they adapted. This chapter is about that relentless adaptability, about how coyotes learn to survive not just in wild landscapes, but in the very heart of human civilization, and how that adaptability, ironically, creates new dangers. Because sometimes when you adapt too well, you step into a world that doesn't want you. For a coyote, it's truly adapt or die. To the expansion of the coyote. Originally, coyotes were animals of the Great Plains, wide open prairies, grasslands, and deserts. For thousands of years, that's where they thrived. But when humans pushed westward, cutting down forests, killing wolves, and reshaping the land, coyotes saw opportunity. With wolves, their biggest competitors, nearly eradicated in many regions, coyotes spread. They expanded into forests, mountains, farmlands, and eventually into cities. Today, coyotes live everywhere, from remote deserts to the streets of Los Angeles, Chicago, New York, and even cities in Canada. There are coyotes in neighborhoods, coyotes in parks, coyotes padding down alleyways at 2 a.m. They have become one of the most adaptable wild mammals on the planet. But this expansion wasn't about choice. It was about survival. Humans took away the wild, so coyotes carved out a space in our world instead. Urban coyotes, masters of survival. In cities, coyotes face challenges no wild ancestor could have imagined. Roads buzzing with cars, noise pollution drowning out their howls, trash instead of prey. Yet somehow they adapt. Urban coyotes have learned to use drainage ditches, train tracks, and alleyways as travel corridors, cross roads late at night to avoid traffic, hunt rats, pigeons, rabbits, and even squirrels in city parks, scavenge from dumpsters, garbage cans, and compost piles, blend into the human world so well that most people never notice them. In fact, studies show that many people living in cities with large coyote populations never actually see one. Coyotes become ghosts of the urban night, slipping past streetlights, navigating between backyards, silent shadows that survive by staying invisible. But invisibility isn't always enough. The constant risk of roads. The number one killer of urban coyotes isn't hunters, isn't disease, and isn't starvation. It's cars. Highways slice apart their territories. Neighborhood roads become deadly gauntlets. A single moment of miscalculation, a sprint across asphalt, a pursuit of prey near the roadside, and a coyote's life ends in headlights. Every year, thousands of coyotes are killed by vehicles. And when one dies, it's not just the individual that's lost. A mother struck by a car leaves pups to starve in the den. A father killed leaves a mate alone. So while coyotes adapt to the city never adapts to them. Roads remain death traps, invisible borders that claim countless lives. Because garbage and the double-edged sword of food. Food in the city is abundant, but dangerous. Coyotes eat rodents, rabbits, and other small animals that thrive in urban environments. That helps keep populations in check. In fact, coyotes are one of the best natural pest controls in cities. But the real temptation is garbage. Dumpsters, compost bins, pet food left outside, all of it becomes a feast. Here's the problem. Once coyotes start depending on human food, they stop being invisible. They start showing up in backyards, sniffing around porches, approaching houses, And when humans see them up close, fear takes over. A coyote digging through trash is no longer just a ghost of the night. It's a nuisance, a danger, a reason to call animal control. In adapting to eat our food, coyotes step into conflict with us. Pets, fear, and conflict. Perhaps the greatest flashpoint in the human-coyote relationship is pets. For a coyote, a small dog or cat wandering outside at night looks a lot like prey. Rabbits, squirrels, house cats. To them, the difference isn't much. And when pets go missing, coyotes are blamed. Sometimes fairly, sometimes not. This fuels fear. Communities panic. News reports sensationalize. Suddenly, coyotes are no longer invisible survivors. They're villains. And what happens to villains? They're hunted, trapped, poisoned, or relocated. Coyotes that adapt too well, those that get too comfortable living around people, usually don't live long, because the closer they come to us, the more we decide they don't belong. The risks of being too smart. Coyotes are incredibly intelligent. They can solve problems, change behaviors, and even learn from failed attempts to hunt or scavenge. But intelligence brings risks. A coyote that learns to cross a highway might survive longer, until one mistake costs its life. A coyote that learns garbage is an easy meal might thrive, until a neighbor calls animal control. A coyote that learns humans aren't immediate threats might approach too closely and end up shot. In other words, the smarter a coyote gets about living with us, the more likely it is to run into conflict with us. Adapting too well can be a death sentence. Adaptation through evolution. This isn't just individual learning. Scientists have noticed coyotes physically and behaviorally evolving to survive alongside humans. Urban coyotes are often smaller than rural ones, making it easier to slip through fences in tight spaces. They're more nocturnal, adjusting their schedules to avoid human activity. They sometimes form smaller packs, or even live as solitary animals to reduce visibility. In short, the city is reshaping coyotes. Each generation learns from the one before, passing down survival strategies that make them better suited to life in our world. But evolution doesn't erase danger. It just makes the struggle last longer. To the tragic irony. Here's the irony. Coyotes are survivors. They adapt to deserts, forests, farmlands, and cities. They live where wolves can't, where bears won't, where deer and elk vanish. They find a way. But their greatest strength, adaptability, is also their curse. Because the more they adapt to us, the more they cross our invisible boundaries. The more they live in our neighborhoods, the more we fear them. And the more we fear them, the more we kill them. Coyotes can't win. If they don't adapt, they die of starvation. If they do adapt, they risk dying at our hands. Adapt or die. But sometimes adapting just means dying later. The story of coyotes is not one of weakness, but of resilience. They've proven that no matter what humans throw at them, habitat destruction, hunting, disease, starvation, they can find a way to survive. But survival is not the same as thriving. And for coyotes, adapting to our world comes with a constant price: loss, fear, and conflict. So yes, coyotes adapt. They always adapt. But every howl that echoes through an alleyway, every paw print in fresh snow outside a city, every shadow darting across headlights is a reminder that adaptation is not freedom, it's survival under siege. Because in the end, the coyote's choice is the harshest one of all: adapt or die. 8. The pain of being misunderstood. If you've followed along this far, you know that being a coyote is already full of struggles: starvation, predators, hunters, and the constant pressure of living alongside humans. But perhaps the cruelest part of all isn't hunger. It isn't traps. It isn't even death on the highway. It's being misunderstood. Coyotes carry a reputation that follows them everywhere, a reputation built on fear, myth, and centuries of bad storytelling. To many people, a coyote isn't a living, breathing animal struggling to survive. It's a symbol of danger, a pest, a villain. And that misunderstanding shapes their entire existence. The trickster legacy. Long before European settlers came to North America, Coyotes were already characters in human stories. In Native American mythology, the coyote is often portrayed as the trickster, clever, cunning, unpredictable. Sometimes the trickster is wise, teaching lessons through mischief. Other times the trickster is foolish, bringing chaos upon himself. These stories weren't meant to paint coyotes as evil. They reflected respect for the animal's intelligence, adaptability, and wit. But they also planted an image in the human mind. The coyote as sly, sneaky, untrustworthy. And when settlers arrived, they didn't see the nuance. They just saw a sneaky predator. The trickster became the villain. The villainization of coyotes in media. Think about cartoons, movies, and books. How often do you see coyotes as heroes? Almost never. Instead, coyotes are cast as villains. The ones chasing roadrunners, the ones scheming in the shadows, the ones lurking at the edge of the farm. From Looney Tunes to old Western novels, coyotes were turned into symbols of cowardice, failure, and danger. The irony? Real coyotes don't act like that. They're shy, cautious, and desperately trying to avoid humans. They're not charging after cartoon birds with dynamite. They're not prowling neighborhoods like evil masterminds. But once you paint an animal as a villain in the public imagination, it sticks. And for coyotes, that stigma became deadly. The label of pest. Perhaps the most damaging word attached to coyotes is one you've probably heard 100 times. Pest. Rats are pests. Cockroaches are pests. Mosquitoes are pests. And when an animal is labeled a pest, it becomes something less than life, something disposable. Coyotes have been given this label largely because they're survivors. They live near us. They eat our trash. Sometimes they prey on livestock or pets. And instead of seeing that behavior as the desperate attempt of a wild animal to survive, we lump them in with insects and rodents. The word pest erases the complexity of their lives. It reduces them to a nuisance. And once something is a nuisance, people stop caring about killing it. Scapegoats of the wild. Another painful part of being misunderstood is how often coyotes are blamed for problems that aren't even their fault. A farmer loses chickens to raccoons? Blame the coyote. A neighborhood cat goes missing? Blame the coyote. A deer population declines? Must be the coyotes. Coyotes become the default scapegoat for almost every negative thing that happens in rural or suburban ecosystems. But the truth is, coyotes aren't the monsters people think they are. They eat mostly rodents, rabbits, fruit, and carrion. They help control pests that would otherwise overrun farms and neighborhoods. Yet because of misunderstanding, they're punished for crimes they didn't commit. Fear of the unknown. At the root of much of this misunderstanding is fear. Humans have an instinctive fear of predators. A glimpse of glowing eyes in the dark, a howl echoing across the hills. It stirs something deep and primal in us. For wolves, bears, and mountain lions, that fear makes some sense. They're large predators capable of injuring or even killing people. But coyotes? Attacks on humans are incredibly rare. So rare that you're statistically more likely to be injured by a dog, a deer, or even a lawnmower. Yet the fear persists. Why? Because misunderstanding magnifies fear. If all you know about coyotes comes from scary headlines or villainous portrayals, you'll assume the worst. And that fear fuels policies of extermination. The war on coyotes. For over a century, coyotes have been targeted by government-sponsored eradication campaigns. Poison, traps, shooting from helicopters, killing contests where hundreds are slaughtered in a single weekend. And all of it justified by the idea that coyotes are dangerous, destructive, and worthless. But here's the bitter truth. No matter how many coyotes are killed, the population bounces back. They breed more pups when threatened. They spread into new areas when pressured. It's a cycle that has repeated for decades. So the war continues, built on misunderstanding, with coyotes paying the price. The reality behind the myths. Let's set the record straight. Coyotes aren't bloodthirsty killers. They mostly eat small animals, berries, and carrion. Coyotes aren't cowardly scavengers. They're skilled hunters who adapt based on what's available. Coyotes aren't overpopulated pests. Their numbers only surge when humans try to kill them. Coyotes aren't dangerous to people. They avoid us whenever possible. The reality of coyotes is far more nuanced, far more balanced, and far more fascinating than the myths suggest. But nuance doesn't make headlines. Villains do. And so the misunderstanding continues. The emotional cost. Imagine living your entire life with a target on your back, not because of what you've done, but because of what people think you are. That's the life of a coyote. Every howl risks being heard as a threat instead of communication. Every glimpse risks being interpreted as danger instead of curiosity. Every step into human territory risks punishment instead of understanding. The emotional cost, if we can call it that, is constant fear. A life spent hiding, running, avoiding, adapting. Not because coyotes are villains, but because we've decided they are. And that's why, more than almost any other struggle, the pain of being misunderstood defines what it means to be a coyote. You can fight hunger. You can dodge cars. You can adapt to cities. But how do you fight an idea? How do you fight a reputation that was decided long before you were born? That's the tragedy of coyotes. Their lives are shaped not just by the real dangers of the world, but by the stories we tell about them. And until those stories change, coyotes will continue to live and die under the heavy shadow of misunderstanding. 9. Coyote wisdom. We've spent a lot of time talking about the hardships of being a coyote, the hunger, the danger, the misunderstanding, the constant struggle for survival. And honestly, yeah, it sucks to be born as one. But here's the twist. In all of that pain and hardship, there's something strangely inspiring. Because coyotes, despite everything, continue to thrive. They refuse to give up. They adapt, they change, they survive. And in their story, there are lessons for us. Lessons about resilience, about persistence, and about what it means to face a hostile world and keep going anyway. This chapter isn't just about why it sucks to be a coyote, it's about what we can learn from them. Lesson 1. Adaptability is survival. If there's one thing that defines a coyote, it's adaptability. Think about it. For over a century, humans have waged war on coyotes. Poison, guns, traps, government programs designed to wipe them off the map. And yet the coyote is still here. Not just surviving, thriving. Why? Because when the world changes, coyotes change too. Push them out of the prairies, they'll move into forests. Push them out of forests, they'll show up in deserts, mountains, suburbs, even major cities. Coyotes have been spotted trotting down Chicago sidewalks. They've been recorded riding subways in New York. They've been caught on camera crossing the Golden Gate Bridge. Wherever humans go, coyotes follow. Not because they want to live with us, but because they've learned that the only way to survive is to adapt. The lesson? When life pushes you into a corner, you don't break. You bend, you adapt, you evolve. Lesson 2. Resilience in the face of war. Few animals on Earth have endured such relentless persecution as coyotes. Wolves were exterminated from most of the United States by the early 20th century. Mountain lions were nearly wiped out. Bears were hunted to near extinction in many areas. But the coyote survived. Even when poisoned by the thousands, even when killed in contests, even when demonized by every rancher and farmer across the West, the coyote refused to vanish. And that resilience isn't just physical. It's built into their very biology. Coyotes adjust their litter sizes depending on how many are killed. Hunt them hard and more pups are born the next year. Kill half a pack and the survivors will spread out, filling every empty niche. It's as if their very DNA carries a message. We will not disappear. The lesson? Resilience isn't about avoiding hardship. It's about facing hardship head-on and refusing to let it define you. Lesson 3. The power of family. Coyotes are often seen as solitary tricksters, but in reality their lives are deeply tied to family. A coyote pack is usually just an extended family. Parents, pups, and sometimes older siblings who stick around to help raise the next litter. They hunt together, protect each other, and mourn when one of their own is lost. Yes, coyotes mourn. Researchers have observed pack members searching, calling, and visibly distressed when a family member is killed. Family is at the heart of their survival strategy. A lone coyote might struggle to bring down prey or defend a den, but together they stand a chance. The lesson? No matter how harsh the world gets, the bonds of family, however you define it, are a source of strength. Lesson 4. Living with what's available. Coyotes don't waste energy wishing the world was different. They live with what's available. If there are rabbits, they hunt rabbits. If there are mice, they eat mice. If there's fruit in the summer, they gorge on it. If there's roadkill on the highway, they scavenge it. If all else fails, they'll dig through garbage. Is it glamorous? Number. But it works. Coyotes don't cling to some idea of what life should be. They take what's in front of them and use it to survive. The lesson? Sometimes survival isn't about getting what you want. It's about using what you have. Lesson 5. The courage to be misunderstood. Perhaps the hardest lesson, and the most profound, is this. Coyotes live every day under a cloud of misunderstanding. They're feared, hated, and hunted, often for no reason other than existing. And yet, they keep going. They don't get to rewrite the headlines. They don't get to change the myths. They don't get to explain themselves. All they can do is live. There's something deeply powerful about that. Because sometimes in life, no matter what you do, people will misunderstand you. They'll misjudge you. They'll see only the villain they've decided you are. And when that happens, you have a choice. Give in to that story or keep living your own. Coyotes choose to live their own. The lesson? You don't need the world's approval to keep moving forward. Coyote as a mirror. In a strange way, coyotes act as a mirror for humanity. We see in them what we fear in ourselves: cunning, survival, trickery, persistence. We project onto them the qualities we don't like, and in doing so, we misunderstand them completely. But maybe, just maybe, if we looked closer, we'd realize the coyote isn't just a nuisance at the edge of the neighborhood. It's a teacher showing us how to endure in a hostile world. So yes, it sucks to be born as a coyote. You're hated, hunted, misunderstood, and constantly fighting for survival. But in that suffering lies wisdom. Adapt when life changes. Be resilient when the world turns against you. Hold tight to your family. Use what you have, not what you wish for. And never stop moving forward, even when you're misunderstood. Because in the end, the coyote is proof of something extraordinary. You can live through hell and still keep going. And if they can do it, maybe we can too. And so, after all these chapters, the bad reputation, the endless hunting, the dangers of starvation, the heartbreak of family loss, the struggles with civilization, and even the lessons buried in their resilience, we finally reach the end. So, what have we learned? We've learned that being a coyote isn't easy. In fact, it's a constant uphill battle. From the very moment a coyote pup opens its eyes, the odds are stacked against it. Predators, disease, starvation, traps, bullets, cars, poison. You name it, the coyote has to survive it. And if that isn't enough, add to it the heavy weight of human hatred. Entire industries exist simply to wipe them out. They've been painted as villains in stories, nuisances in neighborhoods, and threats on ranches. For many people, coyotes are nothing more than shadows to be eliminated. That's the reality of being born a coyote. To the circle of struggle. Imagine this. You're born in a cramped den with 5 or 6 siblings. It's dark, it's damp, and you're helpless. You depend on your mother for everything. Half of your siblings might not even make it to adulthood. A hawk might snatch one, another might starve, another might get sick. And if you do survive long enough to step out of the den, the world isn't exactly welcoming. Humans see you as a pest. Farmers see you as a thief. Drivers don't notice you until it's too late. Hunters set traps just for the satisfaction of seeing you gone. Every single day is a gamble. Every single day, your life is on the line. That is what it means to be a coyote. The relentless survivor. And yet, despite everything stacked against them, Coyotes survive. They don't just scrape by. They expand. They thrive. Push them out of one territory and they'll claim another. Hunt them down and they'll bounce back with even larger litters. Poison them and the survivors will learn to avoid bait. It's as if nature designed them to endure, no matter how much suffering they're forced to face. And maybe that's the paradox. Yes, it sucks to be a coyote, but it's also proof of just how strong life can be when it refuses to give up. Why we fear them. Part of the reason coyotes get such a bad reputation is because deep down, they remind us of ourselves. They're clever. They're opportunistic. They're survivors. They don't follow the rules we set for the world. They show up where they're not wanted. They outsmart the traps. They adapt to every attempt to erase them. In some ways, they're everything we admire in ourselves: persistence, cunning, resilience. But because they wear it in a wild animal form, we call it trickery or pest behavior. Maybe that's why humans have always had such a complicated relationship with coyotes. They are, in a way, our mirror. And sometimes what we see reflected isn't pretty. Lessons for us. If there's one thing to take away from the life of a coyote, it's this. Survival is messy, painful, and unfair. But survival is still survival. The coyote doesn't complain. It doesn't wait for justice. It doesn't hope the world will suddenly become kind. It simply does what it has to do. It adapts. It resists. It keeps going. And maybe that's the lesson for us too. Life isn't fair. Sometimes it really does suck. But you keep moving anyway, because that's the only way forward. By now you might feel a little different about coyotes. Sure, they can be noisy neighbors. Sure, they sometimes raid chicken coops or dig through garbage cans. Sure, they can be unnerving when you hear their howls close to your house at night. But maybe, after everything we've talked about, you can also feel a strange kind of respect for them. They're not villains, they're not demons, they're survivors. And even though their lives are filled with danger, pain, and loss, they carry on with a persistence that deserves recognition. So yeah, it sucks to be born as a coyote. It sucks to live every day in a world where you're feared, hated, hunted, and misunderstood. It sucks to raise your young, knowing half of them won't live long enough to see adulthood. It sucks to scavenge through trash just to make it through the winter. It sucks to lose family members to traps, poisons, and cars. It sucks. And yet, through all of that, the coyote howls. That long, eerie sound you hear at night isn't just a call to its pack. It's a declaration, a message, a statement to the world. I'm still here. You tried to get rid of me. You tried everything, but I'm still here. And maybe in that howl, there's something for all of us to hear. Because life will try to break you. It will throw traps in your path, poison in your food, storms over your head. It will misunderstand you, label you, and try to push you out. But like the coyote, you have the choice to keep howling anyway. To survive, to endure, to live. To live, so the next time you hear a coyote's howl echoing across the hills, remember what it means. It's not just the sound of a wild animal in the night. It's not just the voice of a pest lurking at the edge of town. It's the sound of survival. It's the sound of defiance. It's the sound of life refusing to be silenced. And that, in the end, is why, yes, it sucks to be born as a coyote. But it's also why the coyote will never disappear.